71 degrees below zero. In Yakutia, this isn't just weather. It is a death sentence. At this temperature, steel snaps like glass, and breath freezes before it leaves your lips. But on the coldest night in history, 90-year-old Natalia Volkov didn't hide. She opened her door to a monster, defying nature to save a life that would eventually change hers forever. This is the story of the woman who froze time. The locals call it the white silence. It is a specific kind of quiet, found only in the Oymyakon Valley of Yakutia, Siberia, the coldest permanently inhabited settlement on Earth. It is a silence so heavy, so oppressive, that you can hear the blood rushing through your own eardrums. On January 16th, the thermometer outside Natalia Petrovna Volkov's window read -71 degrees Celsius, -95.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Natalia was 90 years old. Her face was a topographical map of the Siberian wilderness, weather-beaten, lined with deep fissures of experience, and set with eyes the color of glacial ice. She lived alone in a wooden izba log cabin that her husband, Nikolai, had built with his own hands 60 years ago. Nikolai had been buried in the permafrost for 2 decades, but Natalia refused to move to the city of Yakutsk with her great-grandchildren. She claimed the city air tasted like metal and lies. That night, the air didn't taste like anything. It was too cold to smell. The whispering of the stars was loud tonight, the phenomenon where the moisture in your exhaled breath instantly turns to ice crystals, creating a soft, crackling sound as they collide in the air. Natalia tightened her reindeer fur shawl. The fire in the large brick pechka stove was roaring, but the cold was a living entity, clawing at the moss-packed crevices of the logs. She needed more birch wood. If the fire died, she died. It was that simple. She stepped into her heavy felt Valenki boots, wrapped a second wool scarf around her head, and pushed open the heavy wooden door. The cold hit her like a physical blow, a hammer to the chest. Her lungs seized. It was a suffocating freeze. The world was painted in shades of bruised blue and absolute black. The snow crunched under her boots with the sound of gunshots. She made her way to the woodpile, moving with the slow, deliberate shuffle of the very old. Every calorie mattered. Every movement had to be calculated. As she bent to pick up a frozen log, something broke the geometry of the snow. Near the edge of the forest, where the taiga met her clearing, there was a lump. It was dark, roughly the size of a sack of potatoes, and half buried in a drift. It shouldn't be there. A wolf? A stray dog from the village of Tomtor, 3 miles away. Natalia squinted against the biting wind. Curiosity was dangerous in the taiga, but instinct was louder. She left the wood and shuffled toward the shape. As she got closer, her heart hammered against her ribs. It wasn't a dog. The fur was thick, coarse, and matted with ice. The ears were rounded. It was a brown bear cub. It was curled into a tight ball, its nose tucked under a paw, frozen into a statue of misery. In Yakutia, bears should be deep in hibernation. For a cub to be out in January, in the white silence, meant a tragedy had occurred. The mother was either dead, poached for bile and paws, or the den had been flooded or destroyed. Forcing them out, Natalia kicked her boot against the cub's flank. It was hard as rock. "Poor little devil," she whispered, her voice cracking in the dry air. Frozen, solid. She turned to leave. Nature was cruel, and she had seen enough death to know when to walk away. But as she turned, a gust of wind blew the snow off the cub's ear. It twitched. It was a microscopic movement, a spasm of dying nerves, or life. Natalia stopped. She looked back at the warm glow of her cabin windows, then down at the frozen beast. She was 90. She weighed less than 100 pounds. The cub, even starved and young, was a dense weight of bone and muscle. "Nikolai would call me a fool," she grumbled into her scarf. She dropped her mittens on the snow and grabbed the cub by the scruff of its neck and its rear leg. She pulled. It didn't move. It was frozen to the ground. Panic flared in her chest, not for herself, but a sudden, fierce determination. She kicked the snow away, digging with her bare hands for a second until she found purchase. She heaved. her old spine screaming in protest. With a sickening, tearing sound of ice letting go of fur, the cub broke free. She couldn't carry it. She fell to her knees, gasping, the cold air burning her throat. She unraveled her heavy shawl, the one her mother had made, and rolled the stiff cub onto it. Grabbing the ends of the shawl, she began to drag it. The 20 meters to the door felt like 20 miles. She slipped, her knees hitting the ice. She coughed, seeing black spots dance in her vision. Not here, she told herself. I will not die in the snow. She dragged the bundle over the threshold, kicking the door shut behind her with the last of her strength. She collapsed on the floorboards, the room spinning, the sound of the wind suddenly replaced by the crackle of the stove and the ragged rasp of her own breathing. Next to her lay the apex predator of the taiga, a killing machine, and it wasn't moving. The heat of the cabin was aggressive compared to the outside world. The sudden temperature shift made Natalia dizzy. She stripped off her outer layers, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. The adrenaline dump was leaving her weak. She crawled toward the bundle. The cub was a male. He was emaciated, his ribs showing through the thick winter coat. But he was heavy. He was stiff, in a state of hypothermic coma. Wake up, little devil, she whispered, touching his nose. It was dry and cold as stone. She knew the rules of hypothermia. If she warmed him too fast, the shock would stop his heart. If she didn't warm him fast enough, the cold would finish him. She dragged him closer to the pechka, but not directly in front of the fire. She grabbed old towels and blankets, rubbing the snow and ice from his fur vigorously to stimulate circulation. The smell of wet dog and pine resin filled the small room. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. 20 minutes. Natalia sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. She looked at the icon of St. Nicholas in the corner of the room. Don't look at me like that, she muttered to the icon. I know he's a beast, but he's a baby. She needed to transfer heat directly. She did something that would have horrified the hunters in the village. Natalia lay down on the rug, unbuttoned her heavy wool cardigan, and pulled the bear cub against her chest. She wrapped her arms around the stiff, icy body, burying her face in the fur of his neck. She shared her warmth, her 90 years of life seeping into the frozen stillness of the animal. She drifted in and out of consciousness, exhausted. She dreamed of her husband, Nikolai, hunting in the deep woods. In the dream, he wasn't hunting a bear. He was hunting her. A sound woke her, a low, guttural whine. Natalia's eyes snapped open. The weight against her chest shifted. She pulled back. The cub's eyes were open. They were milky blue, confused, and terrified. He let out a sharp huff, a sound of distress. Shh. Natalia soothed, instinctively using the voice she had used for her children 70 years ago. Quiet now. You are safe. The cub tried to stand. His legs were jelly. He scrambled, claws scrabbling uselessly on the wooden floorboards, scratching deep grooves into the pine. He collapsed, panting, his pink tongue lolling out. He was alive, but he was terrified. Natalia moved slowly. She went to the kitchen counter and grabbed a tin of condensed milk, a luxury she saved for holidays. She mixed it with warm water in a bowl. She approached him. The cub hissed, pulling his lips back to reveal small, sharp white teeth. Even at this age, the instinct to kill was there. Don't be rude, Natalia scolded sternly. She sat on the floor, pushing the bowl toward him. The smell hit him. The sugar, the fat. The cub lunged. He didn't lap the milk. He inhaled it, splattering white liquid over his snout and Natalia's floor. He finished the bowl in seconds and looked up at her, letting out a demanding squeal. Greedy, she smiled, a genuine smile that cracked the stern mask of her face. I will call you Boran. The blizzard. Because the storm brought him. For 3 days, the storm raged outside, burying the cabin in snow drifts up to the roof. Inside, a strange domesticity formed. Boran regained his strength with terrifying speed. He followed Natalia everywhere. When she sat in her rocking chair, he curled up on her feet, a living heat source. When she cooked, he stood on his hind legs, bracing his paws against her hips, begging for scraps. He was no longer a frozen lump. He was a wild animal, and he was growing. On the fourth day, the storm broke. The sun came out, illuminating a world of blinding white diamonds. Natalia was in the kitchen chopping carrots when she heard it, the sound of a snowmobile engine. It was distant, but getting closer. Her stomach dropped. In this part of Siberia, visitors were rare. It was usually the mail carrier, Grigory, or her neighbor, Sergei, coming to check if she had frozen to death during the storm. But this engine sounded different. It was louder, deeper. A twin-engine Buran snowmobile. She looked at Boran, who was currently chewing on the leg of her kitchen table. If the authorities found him, they would shoot him. It was illegal to keep a bear. They would say he was dangerous. They would say he had lost his fear of humans and would eventually kill someone. And they would be right. But as she watched the cub roll onto his back, exposing his soft belly, she knew she couldn't let them have him. The engine noise cut out. Heavy footsteps crunched on the porch. Thump, thump, thump. A heavy fist pounded on the door. Natalia Petrovna, open up. It wasn't Sergei. It was Artem Volkov, no relation, but a man known in the region. He was a poaching inspector, a man with cold eyes and a quota to fill. Rumors said he sold the skins of the animals he confiscated. Natalia grabbed Boran by the scruff. He let out a yelp. She shoved him into the large wooden chest at the foot of her bed and piled heavy quilts on top of it. Quiet, she hissed. Not a sound. She smoothed her apron and opened the door. Artem stood there, a rifle slung over his shoulder, his face red from the cold. He didn't smile. Natalia, he nodded, stepping inside without asking, bringing a cloud of freezing vapor with him. He sniffed the air. Smells like wet dog in here, Artem said, his eyes scanning the room. I didn't know you had a dog. I don't, Natalia said, her voice steady. It's my old coat. Drying by the fire. Why are you here, Artem? Artem walked to the center of the room. He looked at the scratches on the floorboards, the fresh, deep gouges Boran had made when he first tried to stand. He looked at the empty bowl of condensed milk. He turned to Natalia, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. We found a sow, a mother bear dead about 5 miles north, Artem said softly, shot by poachers. But her tracks showed she had a cub. We tracked the cub to the edge of the woods, right near your woodpile. He took a step toward her. Where is it, Natalia? From the wooden chest at the foot of the bed, a soft, scratching sound emerged. The scratching sound from the chest was rhythmic, like a metronome counting down the seconds to disaster. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Artem's eyes locked onto the heavy wooden box. He didn't reach for the chest. He reached for the rifle on his shoulder. Don't, Natalia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had the density of iron. She moved to the side of the pechka, her hand hovering near the iron poker used for the fire. You're breaking the law, Natalia, Artem said, unslinging the rifle with practiced ease. Harboring a predator. It's a fine, a big one, or, he smiled, a jagged expression that didn't reach his eyes. I take the cub. A zoo in Moscow pays $5,000 for a live specimen. I'll split it with you. 500 for you. He is not for sale, Natalia spat. And I know who killed his mother. I saw the tracks near the den. Skidoo tracks. Yours. Artem's smile vanished. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Accidents happen. He stepped toward the chest and kicked the latch open. The lid flew up. Boran, terrified by the noise and the smell of the stranger, exploded upward. He was small, only 20 pounds, but he was 20 pounds of panicked muscle and needle-sharp claws. He didn't attack Artem's throat. He went for the leg, sinking his milk teeth into Artem's calf through the thick snow pants. Artem roared, more in shock than pain, and swung the butt of his rifle down. Crack. The blow caught Boran on the shoulder. The cub yelped a high-pitched, human-sounding cry and scrambled under the bed. Artem raised the rifle, aiming at the darkness beneath the bed frame. No. Natalia moved faster than a 90-year-old woman should. She grabbed the boiling kettle from the top of the stove and hurled the water at Artem. It wasn't a direct hit, but the steaming water splashed across his neck and arm. Artem screamed, dropping the rifle to clutch his scalded skin. In that chaotic second, Natalia grabbed the double-barreled shotgun hanging above the mantel Nikolai's gun. It hadn't been fired in 20 years. She didn't know if it was loaded. She leveled it at Artem's chest. The barrels shook violently in her arthritic hands. "Get out," she rasped. Artem looked at the gun, then at the old woman. His face was purple with rage and pain. "You crazy hag. You think you can shoot me? I am 90 years old," Natalia said, her finger tightening on the trigger. "I have nothing to lose." "Do you?" The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Artem spat on the floor. "You're dead, Natalia," he hissed, backing toward the door. "The cold will get you, or I will come back with the police. You'll die in prison." He slammed the door behind him. The sound of his snowmobile engine roared to life, then faded into the distance. Natalia dropped the gun. Her knees gave out, and she slid to the floor. Boran crawled out from under the bed, limping. He nuzzled her hand, licking the sweat from her palm. She stroked his ears, tears freezing on her cheeks. She knew Artem was right about one thing. He would come back. He would bring the authorities. They would kill Boran and put her in a home. She looked out the window. The sun was setting, casting long purple shadows across the snow. The temperature was dropping again. -65 degrees Celsius, expected tonight. "We cannot stay here, little devil," she whispered to the bear. She packed what she could in a sled: dried meat, the rest of the condensed milk, matches, a knife, and Nikolai's rifle. She dressed in every layer she owned. There was an old trapper's hut, deep in the Black Forest, 20 miles north. It was abandoned, off the maps. It was a suicide mission. A 90-year-old woman and a lame bear cub walking 20 miles in the Siberian night. But staying meant death for Boran. She opened the door. The white silence greeted her. She tied the sled to her waist, looked at her home one last time, and stepped into the dark. 3 years passed. The village of Tomtor forgot about Natalia Volkov. The police had found her cabin empty, the door swinging in the wind. They assumed she had wandered off in a dementia-induced haze and was eaten by wolves. Artem Volkov told everyone he had tried to check on her, but she was already gone. But the hunters began to tell stories. They spoke of a ghost of the taiga. They said that deep in the northern woods, where the trees grew thick and the snow was never broken, a giant walked. A brown bear, larger than any grizzly, standing nearly 3 meters tall on its hind legs. And they said the bear was not alone. They claimed that riding on the bear's massive back, wrapped in furs so thick she looked like a spirit, was a small, hunched figure. Most dismissed it as vodka-fueled superstition. Bears don't tolerate humans. Bears eat humans. But on the 4th winter, the temperature dropped to record lows again. -72 degrees Celsius. Birds froze in mid-flight. Artem Volkov was hunting. He was greedy. He had ventured too far north, chasing a herd of elk, and his snowmobile had broken a track. He was 10 miles from civilization, and the sun was going down. Panic set in. He tried to walk, but the snow was waist-deep. The cold began to shut down his body. His fingers went numb, then his feet. He fell, curling into a ball under a spruce tree, waiting for the sleep that precedes freezing to death. He closed his eyes. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound of heavy steps woke him. Not a machine. Something alive. Artem looked up through frozen eyelashes. Towering over him was a monster. A brown bear, immense and terrifying, its breath pluming like smoke from a factory chimney. Its fur was tipped with frost, making it look like a creature made of silver. Artem tried to scream, but his throat was frozen. He fumbled for his rifle, but his hands were useless blocks of ice. This was it. Karma. The bear lowered its massive head. It sniffed Artem. The hot breath thawed the ice on Artem's face. Then, the bear turned its head, looking back into the shadows of the trees. A figure emerged. She moved using a walker made of branches. She was bent double, her face almost entirely hidden by a reindeer hood. She looked ancient, a relic of a bygone era. She shuffled to the bear and placed a withered hand on its flank. The massive predator leaned into her touch, gentle as a kitten. The woman looked down at Artem. Her eyes were milky with cataracts, but they held a spark of recognition. "Natalia?" Artem croaked. "You're dead." "Not yet," she whispered. Her voice was like dry leaves skittering on ice. She said something to the bear in a language Artem didn't understand, perhaps Yakut, perhaps a language of her own invention. Boran grunted. He stepped forward, grabbed Artem by the collar of his expensive parka with his teeth, and lifted the 200-pound man as if he were a rag doll. They didn't kill him. They dragged him. For 3 hours, the bear dragged the man through the snow, with the old woman following in the tracks. They left him on the outskirts of Tomtor, near the road where the snowplows passed. When the headlights of a truck washed over him, Artem was half dead, raving about a witch and her monster. No one believed him. They said the cold had taken his mind. 2 weeks later, Natalia Volkov died. She didn't die in the cold. She died in the abandoned trapper's hut, sitting in her husband's old chair, the fire burning low. Her heart simply stopped, tired after 94 years of beating. Boran did not eat her. When a group of geologists found the hut a month later, they saw the tracks, bear tracks, pacing back and forth in front of the door, hundreds of times. A vigil. Inside, they found Natalia. She was perfectly preserved by the cold, looking like she was merely sleeping. Her hands were folded over her chest, and covering her body, keeping her warm even in death, was a massive pile of fresh pine boughs and reindeer moss. The bear had tucked her in. The geologists reported that as they loaded her body onto the helicopter, a single, mournful roar echoed from the ridge above, a sound so full of grief that it made the seasoned men weep. The bear was never seen again. But to this day, in the deep winters of Yakutia, when the white silence falls and the wind howls, the locals say it is not the wind at all, it is Boran, singing a lullaby to the woman who saved him. Natalia Volkov proved that even in the coldest place on earth, the warmth of the human spirit can defy nature. She traded her safety for a life that wasn't hers, and in return, she found a guardian who stayed with her until the very end. It is a haunting reminder that kindness is the only language that every species speaks fluently. If this story chilled you to the bone or warmed your heart, please hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Do you think animals have souls like humans? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for more incredible true stories from the edge of the world. Stay warm, everyone.